Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I'll talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Doctor Who, as well as the series premiere of Class. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about the season premiere of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about the series premiere of Class. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the premiere of Doctor Who. So, obviously, this is, technically not really the first episode of Doctor Who, because I guess technically the Christmas episode kind of counts as that, though that might count as part of last season. I think they're kind of counted as one-offs, but nevertheless, this is our first introduction to the new companion, Bill, and she's a very interesting lady. In the sense of like how she met the Doctor was a very interesting thing. Obviously, he's off teaching at school just because he's teaching at school. I wonder, is that just because that's what he wants to do, or is on some level is that him subconsciously following in Clara's footsteps, because she was a teacher and everything. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just like I'm reading too much into it. But the school basically, because Bill points out the fact is like she kind of gives a long-winded explanation about something else rather than explain exactly why she was there to see Doctor. He's like, you're not even a student here, so why do you keep coming to my lectures and stuff? I mean, she technically is there at the school. She works in the cafeteria, serving chips, fries. I had to translate that because I'm not that familiar with like a lot of UK lingo, so when she was saying canteen, I was like, I didn't get that. Obviously, I know like chips or fries, like I've known that for a while. That's one of the few things I could be like, oh yeah, like British talk. That's one of the few things I absolutely know without a doubt. Nevertheless, I was like, so I mean, technically, it is kind of a similar to Clara's situation. Obviously, she worked in a school, obviously as a teacher, but kind of similar thing. Obviously, she worked at, was it an elementary school? Or was it a middle school? I can't remember, but obviously this is like is this a high school or college? I don't know, because once again, I'm not that familiar with the British education system, so, because I know there's like a lot to that, especially considering where the class takes place, which is obviously a high school, but the way this looks, it looks like this is most likely a university from the looks of it, and obviously, now I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's like, it's obviously a university. Nevertheless, moving on, because I'm sorry, I'm getting like thrown off so many different things. But the fact of the matter is, she went to see the Doctor because he's fascinating to her. Because it's like the fact is that you talk about you're going to talk, like your class is saying like, oh, you'll talk about this like highbrow sciencey thing, but then it turns out, oh, you're just talking about poetry. It's almost like the school just said like, hey, yeah, come here, do whatever you want, and she finds him fascinating in that regard. So. And one thing I will immediately bring up about Bill that I really adore is the fact, obviously every companion gets that moment when they get introduced to the TARDIS. Obviously at first she never got introduced to the TARDIS because she was like, oh yeah, it's just like, oh, this is a police box. He's like, yeah, I brought it in with a crane. It's super heavy, which later on she sees the rug that she got him underneath it. It's like, I thought you said this thing was like super heavy. But obviously her introduction to, it's like, obviously, the monster of the episode, which I'll get to soon enough, obviously is chasing them, and Bill runs inside they run into the TARDIS. She's like, I know that you're talking about we'll be safe in here, but the fact of the matter is, like, these doors are made of wood and there's windows, we're not going to be safe here. Because I think Bill had, like, obviously I don't know about the original series, but, from the reboot/continuation, Bill is the first person that's ever come into the TARDIS technically backwards, because everyone's coming like, whoa, like she had to back up and turn around and look and be like, whoa, what's going on here? And even then, I loved it so much. The fact that she's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's not just a room, is it? It's like a room. It's like, technically you can't think of it like this. She's like, it's like a kitchen. And the Doctor's like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, it's like a very posh kitchen and stuff. And he's like, just no one's described it as such. And then she's like, immediately afterwards, he's like, can I go to the bathroom? Once again, breaking the mold. Like, obviously every companion has their own introduction, and it's like, I think every new companion, they kind of have to one up it every time. But the fact of the matter is that Bill, it took a while for it to sink in. She's like, whoa, wait a minute. There's even a part like, she's like, wait a minute, it's bigger on the inside. And Nardo's like, oh yeah, we finally we got there. Because even the Doctor's like, yeah, this is taking longer than usual. Because she's like, wait a minute, we moved to a different place within the school. Did she find out, we're in Australia now? And then finding out it's like, oh, it can travel time and space too. What? Her mind being so blown, and it's amazing. That's the moment you look for, the wonderment. I even love the fact that she brought up something I never thought about, like all throughout the time I've watched Doctor Who. She's like, "What? Okay, you're from another." He's like, "Okay, you're from a planet. You're from space, right?" He's like, "No, I'm not from space. I am from a planet like anyone else." And then she's like, "No, that doesn't make any sense." He's like, "Well, what do you mean it doesn't make any sense? Your thing says TARDIS. Why is it written in English if you're from another planet?" Never thought about that for once. And I forgot what his explanation for it was too. And then also she's like, why does it look like a phone box? And then police box. And then he has to go break down to like, oh, the whole TARDIS situation. That's a cloaking device, obviously stuck the way it's been. I don't remember him bringing that conversation up. When was the last time he brought that up? Because I swear I don't remember that coming up with Clara. Maybe it did. Did it come up with Amy? I don't remember. I feel like it's been so long since he had to actually explain it to a companion that it doesn't act. Maybe it was like an off-screen thing, but do tell me in the comments down below, when did he bring that up to Clara? Like that it looks like a phone box because it's stuck like that? I feel like it's been a while since he had to explain that to somebody. Like at least a companion. Like regular people, I'm sure there's probably been a more recent example, but I feel like companion-wise, it's been a little while. You know, my memory's terrible because like, it just is, so. But obviously in this episode, we deal with a puddle thing that basically, like, there's a girl that Bill meets named Heather who she's, like, super heavily crushes on, which is, like, this episode's a forewarning of, like, man, be careful who you crush on because they might put you in a position that might get you killed. Like, crushing on someone is very, very dangerous. But it's just, like, you feel bad for like Bill too, because she's just crushing on her so hard. I mean, because most people, I mean, I guess because she was kind of because Heather was kind of a love interest, there's a part of me thinking like, oh, she'll make it out of this okay. Some of the love interest in the past, the love interest of the companions have kind of made it through, but Heather wasn't so lucky. She even had like that, like it was like an iris defect. But even Bill was like, that's pretty cool. But her iris defect looked like a star. But basically, she made Bill stare into the water. But the fact is that, like, anytime Heather would look into the water, she was like, obviously, her whole thing was like she wanted to get away from here. Never really got an explanation why. But I guess just life in general was just tough. Or there was just something on the inside that was always screaming, like, I need to get away, get away, get away. Bill looked into the puddle, but like she saw something that was a little off, but she couldn't explain it. And so obviously, what we end up finding out later on for the Doctor is like this thing isn't like an actual puddle. It's actually something that it's not a reflection per se, like a mirror or like water reflects the surface. It's like a thing mimicking you, like, but it doesn't like symmetry. So like basically, a person's face is very symmetrical, obviously. And when Bill looked into it, like it distorted her face to make it just made something about her not symmetrical. But she just obviously it's something you really just couldn't put your finger on. And so when Heather looked into it, the way they were making it sound like she saw symmetry, and it probably like, I guess that's one of the reasons why she wanted to get that. Obviously, maybe she got picked on about it. Maybe it made her feel, out of place. Maybe that ties into why she wanted to go away. But obviously the thing grabs her and kills her. I was hoping that she could be saved. Like, oh, basically it kept her somewhere, but it's like, no, it drowned her and killed her and basically took on her form. Which that's what I always love about Doctor Who. That Doctor Who, like, especially in certain episodes, it kicks up that creepy factor, kind of that eerie, like, scary factor. Like when Bill was in her, like, her flat. Haha, another, I know it's not that impressive, but I figured I might as well use the proper term instead of being like her apartment. But she was there and she looked in the drain and she saw like Heather's eyes staring back at her. And then like later on when she comes across Heather and Heather's there soaking in water, it's creepy because she kept mimicking the word, like obviously because it's trying to say what she's saying, like throw what she said, Bill's saying back at her. Like, hi. It's like Bill was like, hello, and she's like, hello. And then like anytime Bill would step forward, you'd always notice that Heather never actually walked, she just slid forward. So I also like the effect of what it looked like when it takes on the form, like it goes into water form and then reconstitutes itself. That looked pretty cool. But I also love the explanation of what this thing is, because it's pretty impressive. This thing will follow you across the world and as well as time and space. Because they ended up on a different planet like 23 billion years into the future, and it still found him like it found them in Australia. Because then like the Doctor starts explaining that this thing what does it look like? Obviously, with the burn marks around it, it's like, oh, from an airship, or like some ship of some kind. And it basically is like, oh, what would you describe that as if it was a car? It's like, oh, a car that had an oil leak. So it was kind of like some oil leak from some ship, but maybe it's because the ship was special. It kind of had like some very intelligent oil that basically this oil was special in the regards that it was from the ship. So maybe the ship was super smart. So this represented like a fraction of that ship. Like it's almost like the ship's DNA was written into the oil, I guess is one way of speaking. And basically it spent all this time here being stuck as a puddle until Heather looked into it, because it looked into Heather and saw Heather felt the same way. It was this feeling of loneliness and wanting to get away. So that's why it latched on to Heather. But the reason why it's been chasing them this entire time is because it's been after Bill, because Bill made her promise, like, she's like, Heather, like, promise me you won't go away this time. And she's like, I promise I won't leave you behind. And that's what this thing has been driven by, like that last conscious thought in Heather's mind before she died was like, I promise I won't leave you behind, Bill. And so that's why it's been chasing them across space and time, was for this exact reason. It's like, dude, in a way that's sweet, and at the same time it's like super sad, because it's obviously it's like a machine following its programming, but the programming it's following, it's this last thought, this promise that Heather made. Because I like to think on some level that Heather liked her too, especially in that beautiful moment where it's like Bill touches Heather's hand, and obviously it's like it's basically showing her the world. It's like, oh, this is where we could go together, like, come along with me. But obviously the doctor's like, hey, don't do that, it's tricking you, don't believe it. But you know, as she's pulling away, Bill is like, goodbye, Heather. And then like it says back to her, goodbye, Bill. And it's like there's that fraction of Heather still, her consciousness somewhere there responding to her. And there was a moment where Bill was crying, and Nardole was kind of pointing out the fact is, it's like, oh, the doctor, he never notices the tears, but Bill was like, I'm pretty sure they're not my tears. And it's like, oh, dude, that's so sad, dude. And then kind of gets a little sadder too when you add on to the fact is that Bill's like, oh, like, it's like, hey, she's looking at TARDIS, and you had a doctor be like, no, you're not coming with me. Just forget all about it. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. And he's like, oh, just come here real quick, Bill. And he's about to reach his hands up, and she's like, whoa, what are you about to do? She's like, what are you talking about? I wasn't about to do anything. You're trying to wipe my mind. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, she's like, I'm not an idiot, because she brought up earlier in this episode being like, oh, are you a fan of sci-fi? Like, I'll bring it up. The fact of the matter is, like, oh, maybe this puddle is actually like, I forgot what she referenced. Like, it's like, oh, lizards inside of someone's brain or something like that, that it messes with your head or something like that. It's, obviously pulling from sci-fi and stuff, which I really appreciated that she kind of, in a sense, broke the fourth wall, because she even asked the doctor, like, yeah, are you familiar with sci-fi? And you had the doctor just turn and look at her, just like, kind of almost like, fourth wall breaking a little bit. But nevertheless, Bill was like, he's like, I have to erase your memory. It's for the best. I can't let anyone know me. Which, to me, I mean, obviously, like, combined with the fact is that Bill's like, well, fine, do it. But I want you for a second to imagine what it's like if you did that to someone else. Because all this is to the fact is that the doctor doesn't, like, obviously the doctor gets to those moments, he doesn't want companions anymore because of all the stuff that happens to everyone that's with him. Things end badly, typically, for everyone that's around him. I mean, other people, it kind of worked out. Kind of worked out for Rose. Obviously, she lives off in another dimension with her mom. She has her dad, and she's with the other doctor. Martha and Mickey, they're together the last time we saw them. Obviously, it didn't work out too well for Donna, which, that was the thing, like, I constantly forget that that's actually a recurring storyline about, like, memory stuff, like, forgetting, because Donna obviously was forced to forget about the doctor. Because, I mean, in her situation, it was because it would save her life, because she became like the doctor, but it was too much for her human brain to hold all that knowledge in, so it would have killed her, so the doctor sealed her memory away. It's still there, she could remember, but remembering would eventually, remembering that the doctor would unlock it, so that she'd end up dying, so. And then also, the whole situation between him and Clara end up making one of them forget the other, and obviously he ended up forgetting her, which is the question, like, does he remember the fact is that he's the one that made, because obviously how season 9 ended with obviously him talking to Clara without realizing it, because he always had this feeling like that she was someone special, but he just couldn't quite remember why and who she was and what she really looked like. But the name was there, and there was just this faint notion of who she was, but he could never quite grasp it. So I'm wondering, does he remember the fact is that he wiped his memory of her, or is it just like, oh, she's so, because it seems like they distance it from that, like, because like Clara doesn't seem like to be like the because like he doesn't know how important she was to him at one point in time, which is very depressing. Because even in the Donna situation, like I said, it's something I didn't even think about at that time, but obviously now in retrospect and everything, it's like, oh, that was literally the opposite of the Donna situation. Donna was forced to forget about him. He was forced to forget about Clara. So, you know. So as you can see, it doesn't always end well for people that are around him, especially because I think the real thing was because of what he had recently lost, obviously that being River. I brought this up during the Christmas special. If you didn't know, like I was partway, like by the time when I originally watched the Christmas special and like kind of quote unquote reviewed it, I had not seen the episode that took place before it, the one that took place between the series 9 finale and the Christmas special, the one about River Songs, the husband of River Song. I forgot what the title of the episode was, but that episode, I missed it. I don't know how, I just missed it because that happens quite often. And I even mentioned that happens a lot more than I'm willing to admit, where I actually miss episodes of Doctor Who. Like, I don't think, to this day, I still don't think I ever saw the season 2 Christmas episode, specifically the one that took place like at the end of season 2. I think that one I missed, the one where he first actually met Donna. So when Donna actually later on appeared, I was like, wait, who are you? Why, you and the Doctor? I think I've still yet to go back and watch that episode. That's something I'm going to correct in the future because I had to set aside across some time because I had to go back and rewatch from season 1 on, because the only seasons I've ever rewatched were 5 and 6, just because like they're probably like my favorite seasons. But nevertheless, I'm just going well overboard. But so I'm sure that actually, you know, obviously just all that is obviously enough reason why you never will want to kind of have a companion. But then he has the TARDIS talking to him. Then he has the pictures of River as well as the other person. Who is that? It's probably going to piss me off when someone points it out. It's like, oh, you don't realize who that is, you call yours? It's like, no, I'm an idiot. I forget stuff, but it's like, I feel like I know who it is, but I don't want to say because I'm going to make myself look like a bigger idiot saying like, it's blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you idiot, it's blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, so do let me know who is the other person in the picture, obviously, but you know, when he had besides River, so. But obviously at the end of the episode, we do see that he has changed his mind. Bill's like, what changed? And he's like, time. So I guess maybe he did a little time traveling without Bill, you know, took some time, and then eventually, I almost completely forgot about the fact is they tried to destroy that ship thing by using a Dalek. What specific war was that he went to? Like, for one, I was like, he wouldn't go to like, because he's like, and I heard the Dalek sound, I was like, he wouldn't go to like somewhere like, he wouldn't go somewhere where, like, the Time War or something like that. I was like, no, there's no way he would do that. So why would he? And it's like, oh, like, just some smaller war. He's like, it looks bad, but it's not as bad as you might think it is. So, but I like the fact is that even a Dalek couldn't kill this thing. It's like, it's, exterminate, and it shoots it, the ship thing, but it can't kill it, and it's repeating back to him, exterminate, even takes on the form of a Dalek, which is almost like, if you ever come across a Dalek, you might want this thing on your side just because of how powerful it is. It's like, holy crap. Like, obviously the Dalek is like the ultimate killing machine in the universe. Well, I mean, many universes actually, but still. I wonder, will they come across that ship thing? Because she did say, Bill asked, she was like, do you think we'll ever meet it again? And yeah, later on, obviously, he's like, well, the fact is, this universe, well, like, space is very big. There's a lot to it, and but the fact is, we've seen this thing can technically time travel. So I don't know if it's necessarily time travel, or does it just wait until the opportunity where it's like, oh, here you are. I'm spread, like, you know, or maybe it can do some form of time travel. I don't know. But obviously, it makes you wonder, will they come across this thing eventually? So. Also, I almost let it slip my mind too. We did also learn a little bit about Bill's mom. The fact is that she died when Bill was just a baby. She never got to actually know her. Doesn't even have any photographs of her, which ended up bringing up a very interesting conversation. Like, with photos of someone, is that enough to kind of satisfy the fact is that when someone is gone, like having photos, is that a good enough memento of someone when they're gone? Not necessarily that, but that seems like that's how she was kind of phrasing it, where she had the doctor looking at the pictures on his desk, and it's like, is that enough? And I think in his case it isn't, because I'm sure a photo is, it's nice to have a photo to remind you of someone that you've lost, but I mean, for Bill, it would mean a lot more. I mean, not more, but it means something different because she never actually knew what her mom looked like. But in this case, obviously, the doctor knew River. He cared for River. So it's a situation where it's like, it's probably a lot more. Is it a good thing to have a photo, or is it a bad thing? Because obviously the bad side of it is like, obviously it's a constant reminder of that person that you've lost them. But at the same time, in a good sense, it is a constant reminder that that person was there, that they existed, that they were alive, essentially. So, which there was a sweet moment that the doctor had where it's like, basically Bill got sent all these pictures of her mom. But if you look in the background of one of them, you see that it was the doctor taking the picture of her, which kind of caught Bill's eye. But I guess she thought like, oh, that's just, that's something else entirely. Like, I guess, because she never really brought it up. So I guess she just kind of let it go. So, which brings up the conversation of why it took her so long to kind of get to the whole like time travel thing. But nevertheless, maybe that's kind of show that Bill is very logical. And so even though she brought up the whole conversation of like, oh, I don't know if you really know sci-fi, but it's like, the fact is that it took her, like I said, it kind of brings all that together. But it seems like more so than anything, it does seem like she's more of the logical person, that obviously she pulls from other bits of knowledge, in particular case, TV. So, I don't know, just thought that was kind of interesting. I wonder, like, will that kind of pop up more or not? It's kind of interesting that the doctor would do that too, just because obviously Peter Capaldi as a doctor has always been very cranky. He's not, obviously he always tried to be a little more sympathetic. That's what Clara was always supposed to be there for, to help him be like, oh, I'm not supposed to say that. I'm not supposed to be rude. I'm actually supposed to be, I'm a good guy, so I have to talk like a good guy. Like, I shouldn't say stuff that I should have a little more tact with the way I talk to people. So just for him to go and kind of do something like that out of his own goodness of his heart, not unless it's a whole time situation where it's like later on in a timeline of spending time with Bill that he decided to go back in time and give those to her at an earlier point in time, something like that. So maybe not. We'll just kind of have to wait and see about that. So also, what's up with that vault thing too? Because obviously the doctor's like, oh yeah, this is a vault thing. He was worried that the ship thing was after it, but it's like, nope, it being here at the same time as he's got the vault is like pure coincidence. It's like, you're leaving it unguarded. It's like, it'll be fine. It's like, you were worried about the ship getting access to it, but now that you know that the ship is not after it, you're okay with leaving it behind. I wonder, will that have something to do with the class or not? Probably, most likely not, because it's probably just its own thing, just like the classes, which I'll obviously get to that in a little bit. So, but overall, a very good premiere. I'm super excited to see what kind of adventures we go on this season. Obviously, I've saw certain things from the previews, as well as even reading the title of a video. It was kind of a spoiler, but it's like I already kind of had it in my head. It just reassured something the previews had already shown. So I was like, okay. And I'm sure a lot of people already know it, but obviously for the sake of someone who might be avoiding everything, I won't say it. But it's a pretty big thing. And I was like, it seemed like that might be obviously it seems like that's where things are going to head to. And I'm like, okay. So I kind of figured as much, but like I said, I'm skating around it because for obvious reasons. So I won't really go into details of what I'm talking about. Oh, so basically, Michael, you just spent the last minute talking about nothing. Yes. Sorry. I'm stupid. But I'm very excited to see what the rest of the season holds for us. I'm very excited to see where we go in next week's episode. And now moving on to the series premiere of Class. So very interesting show that obviously I went into this not really knowing too much about it. Like prior to the commercials, obviously I saw running throughout the Doctor Who episode. I had previously only seen like one or two prior to that. So I went into this not really knowing too much. And I was actually quite surprised going into it, learning what I have. Obviously you learning that Charlie and Quill are both aliens themselves. I wasn't expecting. I thought everyone that was associated would be 100% human, which most of the group is. Obviously, Tanya, Ram, and April are all human. The fact is that it was going to take place in I think because I guess it's a very good reason to kind of feel that way. Is it very much does remind me of Torchwood. Obviously, a much younger group, and obviously that doesn't. I can't remember, did Torchwood have government backing? Or did they kind of do all that in secret? I think I think they did it all in secret. Obviously, it kind of correlates in the class too, because it's like they have to do everything in secret too. Because it's not like they can explain it to everyone. It's like, oh, this, and that is happening. It's like no one would believe you. So, but nevertheless, obviously, this all deals with the fact is that Charlie's here on Earth. Him and Quill were brought here by the Doctor because basically their entire planet was massacred by these creatures known as the Shadowkin, who massacred all their people. Which the Doctor took sympathy for him because he knows what it's like to be the last of your species. You always have to say that quotation marks. But the Shadowkins are very interesting creatures. The fact is that they bounce from your shadows like that. And just overall, like, and it's something I saw pop up about, that's something I have slightly read about the show. I was like, oh yeah, it has a very darker tone compared to anything else. It's like, it really does. Hence, once again, I have to make the comparisons because, I mean, obviously, that's another spin-off to Doctor Who. Torchwood, like, Torchwood had its, like, darker storylines and storytelling. Like, obviously, Doctor Who has its darker story elements, too. Doesn't nearly get as bloody as this, like, when, Ram's girlfriend got killed by, the Shadow King, when he just like literally stabbed his sword through her, the blood splattered on Ram's face, and then she kind of like, it was an interesting effect of like almost like her, like you seen her skin kind of crack and then she could like kind of dissipate. That was pretty brutal. I was not expecting it to be as bloody as that, but obviously this all has to do with something known as the Cabinet of Souls. That basically it's some kind of thing, well, literally a cabinet that's supposed to house the souls of every Rhodian who, like, you know, died, like contains their souls. The fact is that it can also be used as a weapon. Is the reason why the Shadow King wants it in the first place, because it could be used against them. I mean, is that the reason why, like, I'm trying to understand, is that the reason why he attacked in the first place? Or is it just because, like, he wanted to wipe them out just because, like, oh, that's my kind. We come, we attack, you know? Was that specifically what they wanted because they didn't know if... It's like they can't have some species have such a deadly weapon that can be used against them. So it's like, why not make the first strike and take the weapon for ourselves? The reason why they want it? Or is the reason why they're trying to kill the last of, you know, killing Charlie and Quill is because they're the last people who might be able to utilize the weapons, being who they are. So, which obviously you have Charlie lying and saying like, oh yeah, when he checked it, it was empty, which at the end of the episode we see that he was straight up lying because it's not empty, it's actually full. Because it seems like Quill has kind of got the mentality of like, hey, I'm gonna use it, like, oh, we could use it as a weapon. And it's like, oh, if it wasn't just some legend or some bedtime story, we could use it as a weapon. But the fact is that Charlie didn't tell her. I mean, obviously, because we ended up finding out that, you know, obviously him and Quill have a very interesting relationship because she was kind of a quote unquote freedom fighter. I guess in other ways you could look at her as probably a terrorist. So basically in their world, it's like once you've committed a crime, basically they put these little things in your brain that make you service, you know, people like Charlie. Like, it's the sense of like, oh, you kind of act as their servants from then on. That basically Quill she has to protect Charlie. If she doesn't, the thing inside of her head will kill her. Which also prevents her from using weapons. Because for her, like, she ended up having this student use a gun at the beginning of the episode because she herself can't use it. So, and she ended up trying to get April to use it, which Charlie stopped her, which caused a whole situation where it's like now April and the Shadow King share a heart. So if one of them dies, the Shadow King in particular, if he dies, April dies. And if April dies, the Shadow King dies. That's how she ended up getting him to back away in the first place. So, and another interesting thing too is, and it's something that April brought up, and I appreciate the fact that she brought it up. She's like, huh, have you always looked human? And then for a moment you get to see what they really look like underneath, and they're like, yeah, of course. Because that was always a thing. Obviously, you know, you take the Doctor, for example, Gallifreyans look very similar to humans, and I was wondering if that was, I was like, I mean, because they know they can't really get around that, because it's like, obviously the Doctor, you know, you've already established, like, Gallifreyans already look like them, so it's like, are you going to make a, I mean, obviously there's plenty of alien species, the universes are very vast, so obviously you're going to have situations where it's like, oh yeah, obviously there's going to be some other species that looks like humans, but in this case, it's like they're hitting their real forms, which I wonder, will we ever get to see them just walk around in their real forms? Obviously, I mean, I think that all comes down to, like, legitimately a budget, like, whether or not, like, the budget allows for you to do that, because I'm sure that costs a lot of money just to show them their forms for that little period of time. I mean, granted, I'm sure they saved a little because, I mean, who am I here talking about a show's budget like that? I'm sorry. But I'm very interested to see will we ever get to see the real forms over the course of the series. But it seems like obviously we're kind of already in this one episode. We've already established a lot of her characters. You take Tanya, for example. Tanya is very, very smart because she's actually like the youngest person in her class because they're all like 12 years, I think. So she's like 3 or 4 years younger than everyone, yet she's super smart. Her mom, it seems, is very overprotective in the sense of like her mom's like, hey, I don't want you going to prom. Or the fact is that she catches her talking to Ram at one point in the episode, like, oh, you're talking to a boy. It's like, yeah, mom, I'm talking to a boy who just helped me figure, he was there watching, helping me with the whole situation of like, hey, I'm being attacked by Shadow that's trying to kill me. Obviously, you can't tell your mom that, but it seems like her mom is very overprotective. Then obviously you have Ram, obviously having a very caring father, but the fact of the matter is it seems like Ram seems like you could easily see him just being, he's the smart ass of the group so far, but also he does seem like the bravest and the more like headstrong. I mean, you saw what he did. He attacked the Shadow King. He was literally missing a leg and he attacked. He kept, April from being pulled into that rip like the Shadow King was. So that was pretty impressive. Obviously, he passed out afterwards, which he got like a sick prosthetic leg for it too, which looked pretty awesome. So, and then finally you have April. I'm very curious to see what April's part to play in this. Like, obviously, she seems like she might compete with Ram for being the more brave person of the group. Like, obviously, you have but it seems like Ram might be more the brawn. So it's like Tanya represents the brains, Ram represents the brawn, and then you have April representing kind of the brave, The fact is that she, like I say, willing to kill herself just to make sure that the Shadow King would die. So it's like, could you honestly say the Shadow King can't honestly say the same thing? So, but I do appreciate the fact is that the Doctor was there to kind of bring this all together. I'm wondering, will that be? I get the feeling, obviously, it won't be like a continuous thing. Like, he might pop in every once in a while. It does bring up the conversation of, in the storyline of things, when does this take place? Is this happening before he meets Bill this season? Or just, because obviously it seems like the storylines are kind of their own thing. Like, obviously, there's certain things that kind of influence each other. Once again, bringing it back to Torchwood. Because I love Torchwood, so that's why I have to bring up the comparisons and stuff like that. Like, it easily seems like I'm easily going to love this show too. But the fact is that I don't think there were storylines that coincided, with some of Jack's storylines. Obviously, coincided with some Doctor Who stuff. There's I think it was at the end of season 1 when he left. That was obviously him going back and joining up with the Doctor, going on a little adventuring before going back to Torchwood. So I'm wondering, will that kind of be the thing going forward? Yes, no, maybe. I kind of get the feeling like it most likely won't be, because I think they are supposed to be like 2 separate series. Obviously, having a Doctor, that's the whole point of forming this team, because obviously, that's what I was bringing up, trying to bring up earlier, is the fact is that it's located simply to Coal Hill Academy, because basically, because of this whole, them kind of opening a hole to time and space, the Shadow King doing that, now it's kind of acting as a beacon for everything out there in the universe to be like, hey, maybe we should drop off here at Coal Beacon High. So, Academy. I don't know why I said high. Technically, you get what I'm trying to say. Also, I'm very curious about the, I didn't catch his name, but the guy that Charlie ended up going to prom with. Obviously, he was there during all this, so will he be kind of part of the team or not? Like, he's in the know, but will he be participating in stuff going forward? Because obviously it seems like it's just the main 4 and Quill that is connected to all this. That's gotta be so interesting. The fact is that obviously we know the relationship now. Obviously, that the reason why obviously Quill really hates, because it's the whole situation of didn't like the way that the Rhodians kind of ran everything. So Quill, I think her people are just known as Quills. I guess that's why she's named Quill, just for that sake. It's because it's like, oh, well, or maybe that's the name her people got because she was the leader of it. But now she's like the guard. She's the guardian of the prince. It's like, obviously there's animosity there because she doesn't like him. But the fact of the matter is she's forced to be there. Obviously, once again, as I brought up earlier, because if she doesn't, she dies. So it's kind of a self-preservation thing, the reason why she wants to protect them. But it's definitely going to make things interesting going forward, because they have different views on things, because obviously that's what led to her people kind of being freedom fighters against his people in the first place. So, because the way they broke it down like that, obviously they are the same species. They are just probably like, it's a class system. So it's probably a situation where it's like, oh, the royalty and higher ups and versus like those of the middle, the lower class type of situation. So, because I was kind of under the impression that maybe there were two different species occupying the same planet, but it seems like they are the same species, just obviously at war with each other. I mean, I wouldn't really go as far as saying war, because the way they described it, it didn't seem like it was like an all-out war. So, I am very curious to see how this team works together going forward. Obviously, I also am very curious to find out more about the Shadow King and why they did what they did. Was this all for the Cabinet of Souls, or was it just the fact is, it's like, oh, we need a planet to conquer and we chose yours. Like, what is the state of his planet? Because the Shadow King did say, like, oh, the fact of the matter is another planet covered in shadow. So is his planet still there just empty? Covered, like, do they occupy it? Is that where they are? Or do they go back to their own world when they, like, went through the little tears? I'm very curious. And what other things are going to be awaiting our team as they go forward from here? Since I've already talked about the episode, I will include this. I will let you know, I accidentally saw the first 2 episodes of this series ahead of time. Well, I mean, accidentally, without turning into a very long-winded thing. Basically, I thought the show had already aired, which technically it did in the UK. I didn't realize because it hadn't started airing in the US already. I thought I did, so I was like, oh, I think it's okay for me to watch it online. And that's not the case. I've only seen up to the 2nd episode, which obviously I won't say anything. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil that for anyone. Obviously, I'll talk about it in its own. Like, obviously, I brought up some stuff in this episode. I kind of know some of the answers to some of the stuff, but obviously, like, not everything. Like I said, I've only seen the 2nd episode, which that doesn't mean going forward I will be watching the other episode. I'll be watching them week to week after the 2nd episode, just because I haven't seen them yet. It's a whole thing where it's like I want to make sure, BBC America gets my view, that like, oh, it sees that I am watching it, when it comes on. It's kind of the same reason with Outcast. The TV show Outcast, it's airing in the UK. Like, the 2nd season started like a week or 2 ago in the UK, but obviously here in the US it hasn't started yet. I could watch it, but, that'd be me finding a workaround to watch it, and it's like, why go through all that trouble? Eventually it's going to air here in the States, so that's just kind of the same reason why. But like I said, like, beyond the 2nd episode, I don't know what goes beyond that, because I don't watch previews. I often skip through them if that's something you don't know about me, especially if this ends up being like the first one of my podcast things you've ever heard of. Like, I don't watch previews. Sometimes I can't help myself. I try not to. I'll catch a glimpse of them, but more often than not, I'll just turn away long enough until, like, I can see, like, oh, the date of the next episode. But so far, it seems like a very interesting show, and I'm very curious to continue watching it. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.